So here we are again.
Yes, Help Is Not On The Way with Kevin Ballman
And Mark Dustin. Help is not on the way. Another round of our world famous
podcast.
Our very small world.
Right.
The very small world we live in.
People have listened.
People have listened.
There was like 18 downloads one week, and I only accounted for 17 of them.
Which is like that's 100% better than it was the week before.
Yeah, when I accounted for all 18.
All your devices all around your
Right.
house. Like, I don't think I used this one
I
yet.
yell at my kid and my wife. I'm like, download the
This
podcast.
thing.
We
Come on.
need.
Just like someone like hold your like someone in a hospital bed hold their thumb up to their
Right.
phone so that it registers. Just download it. Then we'll talk about the will.
Right. You can delete it afterwards.
Just delete it right away. It doesn't matter. It counts anyway. towards our ticker tape.
And we've been talking about our own weeks where it felt like help was not on the way. But we've got some real ones where help was not on the way.
We have some. I think we have some great ones today. I mean, I think we have some really. I think this is one of those ones where we were both scratching our heads. I mean, until maybe this morning.
No, for me it was until 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
I think I figured out what. Now, of course, usually when I pick something out, I've already known about it.
Yeah.
It's just trying to figure out what to do. That's the hard.
Yeah, which one? What's
Yeah.
gonna counterbalance each other's, and also there's a bit of there's a little bit of a how you gonna get into this. Yours today, I think, is that one. Mine is a little more straight across the board, but sometimes you want to figure out your way in. What's the angle to actually make it fit even loosely to our premise and all of that stuff. So, but yours definitely sounds like it's from the little I know about it. It sounds like it's gonna kind of like be one of the more abstract and really cool ones that has a lot of angles to it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. It's a little more general, like not a one story really. It's more of a general kind of concept.
Should we get into it? You want to go first? You want me to hit it? You go ahead. Let's hear it.
Okay. My story is really about, in general, it's what's called germ theory of disease.
Which just sounds cool right away.
It does. But, prior to our understanding of what causes illness, typically, viruses and bacteria, so organisms.
Yeah, because there was a time where people had they thought it could have been, I don't know.
Something else.
Yeah.
There was bloodletting at some point,
Yeah.
and there was, evil spirits and all sorts of things. Right?
Anything could have, at some point, anything could have
Right.
could have done it, and nobody knew it was these little microbes. Nobody had a clue.
The original, kind of like the preceding theory that had the most weight or the most credibility was called Miasma theory, which was also known as night air, and it was kind of like toxic air.
Sure. Stagnant, sort of.
And I guess miasma is ancient Greek for pollution.
Okay, so so people lived in pretty bad circumstances. There was whatever, like a human waste in the streets, or there wasn't like the idea of like opening 2 windows for airflow was not a thing yet. You were sort of like crammed into your place, especially in the wintertime, the cold.
And I mean, when you think about it, those kinds of things, probably there's a little bit to that. They thought rotting organic matter maybe was the cause, or things like that. And there's obviously were issues with organic rotting matter.
Yeah,
but it was not the cause of these diseases.
Yeah, right.
And it did take it. It really kind of started with let's see, the first person to write about this was Thucydides.
It sounds like a Greek name. We're going Greek here.
Historian.
Yeah. It's all Greek to me. That's where the saying "it's all Greek to me" came from.
Right, and it was basically the 4th century BC.
Yeah,
and he wrote about the plague of Athens, that the disease could spread from an infected person to another person.
Which is obviously like light years ahead of
yes
what it took to get to anyone else to pay attention to that.
And when you think about like when did this become
Yeah.
accepted? It's a long
It's
time.
a long time.
And so this is, I know it's a little stretch, but this is where I kind of came up with the idea that this is help is not on the way, and that there may have been, say, I don't know, more than 1,000 years of needless deaths because
nobody picked up on.
Right.
And I mean, and to be fair, this is sort of like otherworldly thinking.
Sure.
By him. I mean, he is clearly vastly ahead of his time in his thinking.
Right. And the it was physicians in the Middle Ages, 1025, 14th century, 16th century, 18th century, started to expand on this. There was Ibn Sina, Ibn Katima. You know, these are like, you know, Persian, you know, Middle East kind of physicians or scientists or...
So they're like way, way, way ahead of themselves, way on the fringes. People can't get... It's like Scientology. They can't get their heads around the truth.
Yes.
Yet.
The magic rocks or whatever it is.
That's right.
Or no, that's not Scientology.
The 737 under the mountain or whatever.
I'm confused about which...
It's all the same. Pretty much the same. It's the magic rocks.
So we have all this time in which people, you know, people propose these things, but it's kind of like hearsay. People don't want to believe it. And eventually we get to the 19th century, and there's this is kind of like when this germ theory of disease really starts to take hold. People start to figure things out. But it's not easy, of course, because it involves human beings. It's kind of like wear mask or not wear mask. Like how could a mask possibly prevent something from going in or out of your mouth or nose?
Sure.
I mean, just because it's covered doesn't mean
it's a lot like a lot of things in life is once it's revealed, you're like, oh, duh, obviously.
Obviously,
you know,
right? Yeah.
Really, it really is almost as straightforward as that to a degree. But of course, at the time, that people just had no concept. No one had ever thought that way.
Yeah, I mean, we still argue about things. You know, whether there's global warming, whether humans are causing it or even involved in it whatsoever.
Yeah, or if you change the moon or Earth's orbit, if it will fix global warming.
that is something
Which
that
the
we might have
National
to talk
Forestry
about
Service
in our other podcast. Are we recording?
Which apparently
the smartest man. I mean, not the smartest man.
Not
in Congress, right?
Smartest. I don't think it's smartest.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think he was referred to as something opposite of the smartest man.
I haven't seen this. I don't know all the people in Congress. I can't really speak
I can't say. I can't claim that he is the smartest or not.
Smartest.
Right?
Yeah.
It's possible I don't know.
It's possible. Yeah. You know, it is the thing. We're not insiders.
We're not insiders. No,
so maybe we don't know
exactly.
He may have information we don't have.
Right. I mean, maybe the Earth really is flat, and I just, I don't know. But there was in a hospital in Vienna General Hospital, in the 1840s was this Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis. And this is kind of, I think it's not like an unknown story. If, people who are into this kind of stuff probably have heard of this guy. And he was working in a hospital where it was a very large hospital. It was possibly one of the, if not the world's largest teaching hospitals at the time. Oh. And in their maternity ward, it was so large, they divided it in half. One half was doctors and their students. The other half was midwives and their students. The doctor side had a much higher death rate in the maternity ward.
Interesting.
Much higher, like 5 times higher.
Yeah.
It was like 90% versus 36%.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, like like you went to give birth and you got the doctors, you're probably going to die.
Yeah, it's a death sentence.
Now, he tried to figure out why is that the case, which it sounds like other people weren't even trying to figure out why.
Right.
So, I mean, first of all, he's curious, which is like the first step in this process.
Well, and maybe he's scientific too, in the sense of sort of looking closely at, it's the pattern, looking every single day at the same routine and looking for something that jumps out at you at some point.
And he had a great idea because first of all, he noticed that in the doctor's ward, the priest would walk through ringing a loud bell.
Mm-hmm.
And he figured the ringing of the bell was scaring the women to death.
Well, yeah. That makes
So,
a heck of a lot of sense.
When I heard that, I thought, okay, not a genius.
Okay, yeah.
But he
maybe it
was
doesn't make any
curious
sense.
still, because what happened is he had the priest alter his route and not go through there. And guess what? They still died at the same rate.
I think that the thing here that's a trap that's easy to fall into, and I've already kind of commented jokingly about it, is that you can say, duh, that sounds like a dumb thing. But again, we're talking about a time when you just don't know what the heck it could be. I mean, I trying to be the devil's advocate here and trying to be decent about this guy who clearly came through with some pretty good ideas in the end. Look at everything, right?
Yeah.
Look at everything.
Why
sure.
not? And he did. So to his credit, he deserves a lot of credit, to be honest. Because
there you go. Then.
He's not the only one who is starting to think these things.
Yeah.
This is just one particular story in which help was not on the way. He tried. Basically, he then figured out after one of his friends and colleagues died from the same disease that the women were dying from, that it wasn't just something that happened to women giving birth. He then thought, well, what is the other difference? And he realized that, and this doctor got the disease, I'm putting that in quotes because I don't know what they were calling it then, but he died after getting sick from performing an autopsy, and he had pricked his finger.
Interesting.
So then he thought, he got a piece of the dead person on him, and that caused him to die too. So again,
Closer?
Yeah, closer.
Yeah.
Much closer than a loud ringing bell.
Right.
So he convinced the doctors to wash their hands in between doing autopsies and examining women or performing childbirth.
So he, in a sense, he's sort of like, he has no idea. He doesn't know, but
he does not know.
He's trying something.
Yes.
He's got something, and he obviously was on the right path. He didn't know what it was, but...
And they do. They start washing their hands, and for 3 years, it's like 1847 to 1850, I believe, they wash their hands, and the death rate on the doctor's side drops to about the same as on the midwife side.
Right.
So success, right?
Immediate evidence.
Obviously.
Yeah. Very clear. Yeah.
If you wash your hands and don't spread whatever thing, pieces of cadaver or whatever it is, you will prevent deaths. But that we can't just, have this like happy ending. He, for better or worse, has kind of a personality that's a little bit... he's accusing people. I mean, he's basically putting the blame for the deaths of the women prior to this on the doctors, or at least that's how they see it.
Yeah.
He's starting to go out and give these talks. In 1850, he gives a talk where he, really kind of lays the blame at the feet of the doctors who really didn't want to, wash their hands because, wash my hands? And I mean, come on. Like, how ridiculous is this to wash my hands?
Come on.
What is there, like little invisible men on my fingers that go and kill? I mean, I think that's...
Which is probably literally the words that were said to him.
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah.
And
yes, but they're not men.
So the hospital decides they're not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And the death rate goes back up.
Right. Just in the face of all evidence.
Right. And
it's all comes down to marketing. How are you going to finesse and politicize this?
It's really
right
easy
to make everybody happy?
Because you said politicize, and it's really easy to tie all things back to our current politicization of everything, right? Wearing masks, whether you should get vaccinated, whether global warming is real, whether it's caused by man. It's all a political, tribalistic.
Yeah.
You got to pick a side.
Right.
And if you pick this side, you can't believe in this thing because
Yeah.
then you're a traitor.
Yeah. You got to go Michigan State, or you got to go,
Yeah, U of M.
Arkansas, or else,
Right.
you know,
Ohio State. You can't be a fan of Ohio State, Michigan State. Are you
yeah,
crazy?
you can't. Yeah, to death. You got to go
Yes,
to death.
that's right.
And whatever, if that death is 10 years earlier because you liked Ohio State, well, then that's the way it goes.
That's right.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
Nothing. And if that takes like
I'm
several
an
pregnant women
honorable,
with you,
loyal
that's okay
person.
too. Right.
So, he ends up dying in an insane asylum,
Wow.
I believe is what
Not
happened.
like he wasn't like visiting a friend.
Yeah.
He got strapped in.
Oh, yeah. His career goes straight to hell. I mean, it's
Wow.
like down the drain, goodbye career. And, it's like some of the articles I've read have said that some of these things were overstated and that it was kind of like his abrasive personality. But regardless of whether he was a nice guy or a jerk,
Yeah.
he was right. And he was kind of persecuted for it.
A couple of jerks doing okay today, as I noticed.
Yeah.
They're making a lot of money. People kind of like dig them. I mean, I don't know. It's a lot of jerks, actually. I mean, you can get some serious jerk action, especially if you dive into the entertainment industry. I mean, jerks do great today.
Some jerks do really well, right?
Some jerks do well.
And some jerks are kind of penalized for it. I think it depends. If you're a jerk that's not trying to help people, it's good.
Yeah.
If you're a jerk that's trying to help people, it's bad.
It's also if you're a jerk that's creating something that other people like music or something, or if you're a jerk that made a couple of $1 billion, and so
Yes.
now you're respected because no matter how much of a jerk you are, you made lots of money.
And if you're a jerk to the person who's my enemy, then you're all right in my
And you're
book,
cool
right?
with me. Yeah.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's right. That's right.
And there is still to this day. I'm just going to kind of throw this in here right now, but there is to this day germ theory denialism.
Weird.
And so there are people who still
not really
don't
that
believe. I know it's not as weird as it should be, right?
Yeah.
Not as surprising as it should be.
Yeah.
As is the idea that the Earth is flat and there's a giant wall of ice all the way around it that prevents you from falling off.
Yeah. And then we're all part of a game. Isn't there the whole thing there? We're all part of some sort of computer game.
I probably.
I think there's that.
Yeah.
There's a few things that are sort of like I think that the sad thing about that is that I don't know. I subscribe to and of course this is all subjective, but I subscribe to the belief that there are certain tenets that there are certain things that are just universal truths. Some of you out there may be denying that, but they're still true.
Right.
Like there are germs. Yeah, there are germs.
And they're. I'm going to
World's
go out
round.
on a limb here that the Earth is round.
World's round.
Roundish. Pretty round.
Yeah, kind of. There's a little of a warp to it
Yeah.
because of the gravitational, because of the spin around the sun, right?
I still don't understand why I don't feel like a 6,000 mile per hour wind though while I'm standing here. Because if the Earth is spinning at 6,000 miles per hour,
Oh, you think it'd be windy, right?
it should be really.
The other thing
windy.
about all that is that who cares? Like what's like it's like
Doesn't change anything.
I
right?
remember seeing like an episode or something like that of like one of these old shows like Morton Downey Jr. Remember him? Or we got to get into this with like already recording, but or I don't know, one of those crazy talk shows, and looking at these people all day doing their thing and people yelling at them and all stuff, and I'm just like, who has the time to care?
Right.
I don't care. They hurt anybody? I don't care. They just don't care. Like it's like,
Well, it's kind of like, right now there's a whole debate on, and I know we're getting a little sidetracked, but that's kind of
Sorry,
cool,
my
right?
fault.
It's all right. I like it. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Whether or not COVID-19 escaped from a lab,
right.
which, one side decided, yes, that's the theory we're going with, and the other side was like, no way. And now some of the publications on the side that was in the no way camp kind of like, there's something to this. It's possible. Mm-hmm. My whole thing the entire time has been, it doesn't change anything.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
yes, should we get to the bottom of it? We should try to get to the bottom of it. And we should, if it did come from a lab, we should try to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But that doesn't change how we react to it and whether we deny that it exists or whether we decide that Bill Gates manufactured it so that he could make a patent on a vaccination that will make him a billionaire. Wait, he's already a billion. God, Mark.
Damn it.
This keeps coming back to haunt me. I keep trying to come up with these theories, and they just fall apart when I step through it, one step at a time.
Billionaires, I don't understand. The thing that comes to mind to me is it's like if you're in the tank of water that's filling up and you're running out of air, sort of arguing about what caused the hole in the ship.
Right, yeah. Right. It's your fault. You were supposed to be.
You and I are sort of in that Titanic moment where, you and we're breathing the last vestige, the last pocket of air. Our lips are up there and our nose is almost covered.
And we're
trying to hold on.
about who's
and we're
at
arguing
fault.
over whether we hit another ship or an iceberg.
Right.
Or if the iceberg was a plant.
Right.
It had been pushed towards us by the Chinese.
Bill Gates put the iceberg there.
He towed it there in front of us, dropped it with his massive yacht. Massive yacht.
This $500 billion
That's
yacht.
so big.
Right.
It doesn't. But it doesn't show up on satellite images because
it's stealth.
Because it's stealth. Because it's camouflaged like the ocean. It's painted blue.
It's painted like a big iceberg.
Painted it like a giant iceberg. We are so getting off track today, Kevin.
All right, I will get back on. So, Ignaz Semmelweis is kind of like, this is kind of the display of human. What am I trying to say here? It's basically people who are so, it's like American exceptionalism. You can't ever deny that you're wrong because that would that would take away the foundation of your belief that you're exceptional.
Right. Yes.
That you can never make a mistake because if you made a mistake, maybe you aren't as exceptional as you thought. And so human beings, these doctors, thought they were superior beings. And this guy, and he wasn't the only one, came out and said, no, you're wrong. It's this thing and you should wash your hands.
Right.
And if you don't, people die and it's your fault. And they were like, They were not
Tell
happy.
me what to do.
So there was,
especially the surgical type, the doctor type, because some of them have a little bit of a God complex. So yeah.
Yes, there's one in the news recently here in Whitefish, and I won't even mention, but it's kind of that thing.
Yeah.
So there was a doctor in Italy who had come up with this idea in the early 1800s. Then there was Semmelweis, and then there was Mantell in the UK, John Snow in the UK. Louis Pasteur, Robert Koch, not sure, from Germany. Mm-hmm. And then finally, it kind of, people kind of came to accept this in the late 1800s with Joseph Lister. 1870s, he was, developed practical applications for germ theory with things like sanitation and antiseptics and washing your hands, wearing gloves, things like that. And so when you look at how long people had to die because hubris, is that the word I'm looking for? Hubris, just refusing to expand your horizons and say, maybe there is something
to this.
Yeah.
Well, and so once you reach the point where it's no longer science fiction, right? I mean, in Greece, it was science fiction. It's too far past the mental capacity of someone. I don't mean mental capacity, that's not the right word, but like the scientific advances of the age to grasp, that there are little men running around killing us, you know what I mean? That we can't see.
Right.
But there is a point where you're right, especially once there was actual evidence in the hospital in Vienna to say this is data now.
Right.
I think that's the great failing of human beings we know this, right? Is that there's a certain amount of the population that's willing to follow the sort of the lead of data, because data is not passionate. It does not have a leaning. It just is data, right?
Right.
And yes, you can read data in different ways.
Sure. You can manipulate your study. You could set it up so you only have healthy people or sick people or whatever.
Right.
But, still the data is the data.
Right.
You could look at the scientific, study and say, well, there's failings here, but still, X number of people lived and X number of people died.
Well, there's something to this, and so
Right.
then you have to take that data that this guy, and maybe he is nuts, and you don't really know, but the fact is that the hospital should have taken it seriously back then and gone, hey man, hey, I don't really know what this guy's doing. He's a little sketchy. Maybe we'll put another face on this
Right.
when we actually roll it out, but let's test. Like that's that whole concept of sort of like scientific journals, right?
Yeah.
They have to meet a certain threshold and they have to prove it and they have to show the proof, and it's got to be very clean proof.
And I mean the whole point of science is that someone else can reproduce your experiment.
Right.
Right? I mean, otherwise, if you can't reproduce the outcome, then
It's a
basic-
fluke or
yeah.
it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, or you manufactured
it up.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's pretty interesting. And I mean, there was Oliver Wendell Holmes was another doctor, American doctor,
Yeah.
who almost lost his medical license when he suggested people might live longer if the doctors washed their hands between patients.
God, can you
They
believe?
just didn't want.
It's
if the doctors themselves had come up with this theory all together, right? Like they were all drinking beers at the pub and they were like,
right.
Mark, if we washed our hands, let's try that.
Yeah.
And then if they'd come up with it, right, it would have been clean sailing. Everybody would have been, wow, look at these geniuses. But when this other guy comes up with it and tells all these genius doctors that they need to
It's interesting
change.
because I wonder if people really just thought that, well, they would have, right? I mean, the only thing on my hands is dirt. Or,
Right.
well, yeah, you wiped your nose
Blood.
maybe, or blood or whatever,
Yeah.
but they just see this as such a tangible thing that you can touch. So
Right.
it can't be, it's not smaller than what I see. And that obviously is, there's a huge ignorance to it and refusal to believe, data in the face of your own sort of ego. But looking at things as from a tangible, I can see blood.
Right.
Blood can't go in somewhere. It can't go somewhere else.
Right.
It's right here. It's just blood.
Yeah.
It's such a bizarre thing now. And now it's bizarre. But then again, you rewind. If I had been standing there reading the newspaper or whatever, listening to the town crier at,
Right.
I
mean, we had heliocentrism versus, like whether the Earth was the center of the universe or whether the sun was.
right.
And
Yeah.
when it was determined that the Earth, or claimed, I should say, because according to everybody else, it wasn't determined yet, but it was claimed that the sun was the center of the galaxy, of the solar system, and that everything, all the planets revolved around the sun and not the other way around. That was hearsay, and it was so
yeah.
contradictory to, even though they could prove it, it wasn't understood by those that were needed convincing. And so therefore, instead of me being inferior, you're just going to jail and you're going to die because I don't want to hear it.
Which is like toxic individualism on a universal scale. Like I'm
Yeah.
so insecure. I have to be on a little golf ball floating in the middle of nowhere, but everything else has to be floating around me.
And which is, again, comes right back to, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Right? I mean, does your life change in any way?
No.
If
Right.
the Earth is not
Yeah.
the center of
It
the
doesn't,
universe?
It does. You don't get a raise because of it. You're not like your kids aren't going to be healthier because of it. You're not going to not get gout because of it. It's like none of this.
None of it
There's
matters.
no benefit to you fighting this battle.
Right.
Except for obstructionism.
Yep. And the person who suffers because of it, because of the claim, is only trying to make progress in some scientific way.
Right.
There's nothing they gain from it.
Yeah. It's absurdity. It's absolutely, yeah, right. Exactly. Like, what are they going to get? Notoriety all over the place? But very
See, I mean, that's the transition right there.
polar opposite, though. And this is what I love when we come up with concepts like this, where we're both on the entirely different spectrum of our like sort of interests and what we're interested in this week. Mine's a story that you know about. We all know about to some degree, but it's the story of the mutiny on the HMS Bounty, the ship, the Bounty. Almost everyone's heard about it. There have been movies. Even Mel Gibson was in one of them years and years ago. It's I think Who else? There have been a few people that have done. There have been a few movies. Anthony Hopkins, I think, was in one. Maybe even the one with Mel Gibson. I think so. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because I read there's actually a trilogy. Most people have read the first book. It's a small, quick read, and it's really good. But it's actually a trilogy of books, and I didn't know that when I picked up the first book many, many, many years ago. And then I read the second book, which is a little slow. It's not so exciting, but it's fascinating. And then the third book kind of wraps it up in this really great sort of like bow. So I'll tell you like the story of this, and I'm going to try to I'm going to jump through a couple of things because it is there's a lot to it. So, but jump in all you can here because there's some stuff, Kevin. There's some stuff. So for those who don't know, the Mutiny of the Bounty, it was a mutiny that some sailors on a ship called the Bounty in the South Pacific, they mutinied and they took the ship over and they sort of fled. It's so much more than that though. So the Bounty was a cutter ship which was bought by the Royal Navy in Britain in 1787 it's bought for like £2,000. So you can imagine what like things cost back then compared to today. It had like the three, typical ship of that era, 3 masts, 91 feet long, 25 feet wide at its widest. It was the kind of ship you can picture, but not a big one for the era, for like sort of like a warship kind of thing. And it did have some guns and a small. They packed it with like sort of a trunk full of muskets and small arms. And so what the British were trying to do at the time was they needed a cheap way to feed slaves in the West Indies. I think it was in the West Indies they had sort of like, the British at one point sort of ruled the planet. And they had come up with this idea to go to Tahiti and pick up this fruit called bread. It's fruit called breadfruit. It grows really easily in the tropical climates, and they wanted to recreate it and feed it to slaves. They thought it was a great idea. So they task this ship with going to Tahiti, picking up 1,000 plants, and bringing them to the West Indies. And what this means, though, is that, these ships were not meant for this. So it means there's not enough room on these ships for this. So they had to take over the captain's quarters and a lot of the ship. And they were gonna stuff the crew, the captain, and the officers all into a really small remaining space, which
sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
right
in the
get-go.
hot tropics or rolling, rocking seas and stuff. Oh yeah, you're already at a deficit kicking this thing off. So this commander of the ship is an experienced captain. His name's Lieutenant William Bligh, well known as Captain Bligh for anyone who's read this story. This is a prestigious appointment. But it requires him to take a huge cut in pay. He's making £500 a year on another ship, and he has to drop down to £70 a year to captain this ship. But it's a cool assignment. So one of the things you take to kind of bump your career up for the future,
Right. It's like good on the resume.
Yeah, it's going to look great in his resume. Yeah. So the crew's made up of 44 Royal Navy sailors and 2 botanists, and among the mostly handpicked crew was this 23-year-old guy named Fletcher Christian, and he's the son of some wealthy parents, and he chose the sea over a legal career, and he'd been out doing some things, and he'd actually sailed with Bligh before, so they knew each other already. So they get out to sea. I'm sorry, jumping ahead here. The Bounty set sail from England on December 23rd, 1787. Now, this has been after a long set of delays. They were trying to beat the weather 4 or 5 months earlier. And, bureaucracy and red tape held them up. And so they didn't get going. So they're finally on their way, but it's already sort of like not going great so far. They're already way behind. So once at sea, Bligh, he implements this strict discipline on board regarding sanitation and diet, which is a strategy to keep the crew healthy, and that he learned while serving under this. If anyone knows anything about sort of England and and the English Navy, etc., there was a captain named Captain Cook who's just very, very, very famous. And Bligh was was under him on several voyages, and so Bligh is implementing some of his rules to keep everyone healthy and happy and safe, and they're pretty strict rules. And anyone who doesn't know this, in the British Navy at the time, essentially the captain of the ship is like the emperor. He is the king of the ship. You do not do anything that the captain doesn't agree to. It's very, very, very very regimented and very rule-oriented, and the captain is the king. But Captain Bligh enforces these rules in what is, later was called a fanatical zeal. So he's an intense guy, and he's not a very nice guy.
I mean, so he's like, like your typical middle manager.
Yeah, he got some power.
Yeah.
By the way, he is really good at what he does.
So maybe he's better than your typical middle manager. I mean, he's at least qualified.
He does own it. Like that's the one thing about Captain Bligh you'll see throughout this story is as much as he's like kind of like he's sort of the kind of guy that you love to hate. He's good at what he does. Like you can't deny that this guy is top of his game with some stuff. And a lot of that comes down to this regiment, the fact that he's willing to go through anything to get to the end result. And he, for the most part, seems to toe the party line himself. He'll do it too.
But his men are probably not so disciplined, right?
I mean, we're not talking about Royal Navy. Okay, it's Royal Navy at least. It's not just sort of like the people you pick up at a bar to throw on the ship to go on some merchant marine ship. This is actually the Navy, but there's still, things were run a little looser back then. So the journey to Tahiti, which took almost a year and covered about 31,000 miles, because they had to weave around, points and capes and horns and all that stuff. It starts out smoothly for the most part. People are pretty happy with how things are going. I mean, it's rough life, but they're okay. But it begins to become fraught with tension. One of the first things is it. I got a little buzzer going on here. One of the first things is that so as I was saying, the journey to Tahiti, which took almost a year and covered about 31,000 miles, it starts smoothly, but it becomes fraught with tension. First, because Bligh is really, really overbearing, and his rule implementation and other incidents start to kind of get in the way. Like, for instance, the ship's surgeon, he's a drunkard. His name's Huggin, and he kills this crewman while treating him for asthma with bloodletting. We talked about that in the earlier podcast, on the earlier session, by carelessly causing the infection because he's just not paying. He's drunk. He's not like being careful. He probably
did not wash his hands.
Germ Theory. He didn't know anything about Germ Theory or wasn't paying attention to it. And he tries to cover up his mistake by claiming it was scurvy. It's a whole thing on board. Anyway, you can see things are starting to like devolve a little bit. So the Bounty anchors in Matavia Bay on October 26, 1788, and that is in Tahiti. And Bligh, he's warmly welcomed by the local chieftains, one of which actually remembers him from 15 years earlier when he arrived with Captain Cook.
Wow. Pretty good memory.
Yeah. So, it's a little tense on board, but it's starting to look up. Bligh gives some gifts, and the local chieftains realize find out that they're really only asking for breadfruit in return, and which is like, fine, like really fine. Yeah, you don't want anything else. You can have all that you want. So the sailors start getting to work gathering the plants, and they're being led at this point by Fletcher Christian. He's not the second in command, by the way. He's like the fourth tier guy, but Bligh has been sort of like, Bligh likes him at this. Well, he liked him at the start of the journey, and he gives him some promotions, and nobody really says anything about it, but it's a little bit of a thing, but not too bad because he's sort of handing him promotions. But Bligh's also starting to sour on him a little bit as things kind of move along. The other thing that the crew get busy with is the local ladies.
Women, yeah.
Yeah, you got a ship of men. It's taken them almost a year to get here. They,
I mean, like, what do you expect?
They're
right?
in Tahiti now. And 18 members of the crew are treated pretty quickly for venereal disease, which also includes Fletcher Christian. But and this knocks me out. Christian, he develops an actual like serious relationship with a Polynesian woman whose name is Mautua, but he renames her Isabel after a former girlfriend from England. So I mean,
he's like, no. This is what I will call you.
Yeah, like I remember, it's like I don't know. There's some holes in that we could punch real quickly here with a little class act. Come on, Christian, a little classier than that. So that's the thing is like when you watch like the movies, you see Mel Gibson playing Fletcher Christian, and he's just like this great looking guy, and he's very stand up, and he's honest, and he takes. But the truth is, I think Fletcher Christian was a bit of a.
And he probably didn't look like Mel Gibson.
I doubt he looked like Mel Gibson, but he seemed to do okay. So Bligh, and he's 23 at the time too. So Bligh doesn't get involved with the local ladies, but he is becoming increasingly volatile. He's really mad because his crew seems to be more and more slack in their work efforts. And he is really turning his sights on to Christian, and he is humiliating him in front of others, locals and crew members alike, and he's blaming him for the crew's sort of laziness. And now things like floggings, which Bligh was really, really proud earlier and wrote about really earlier in the journey about being really proud everyone was sort of towing the line and stuff. These are becoming more common. Bligh is starting to get like just flat out angry all the time and really losing his cool. So the alcoholic surgeon Huggin, who this guy literally refuses to exercise. Bligh wrote that basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he wrote in a journal entry that he won't even come up above board for more than like 6 laps around the deck on any given day, and you got to drag him out to do it. Like he likes to be below board in the putrid dungeon of even on the nicest day.
He would have been a great modern day like QAnon troll, right? Down in his parents' basement.
Gaming.
Tommy, come upstairs and you need to go get the trash. Mom, I'm busy.
Mom, you're 38 years old, Tommy. Mom. Yeah. That guy. So he dies. He's not come out. He just sort of like alcoholism and whatever he's doing, like his lifestyle. He dies on December 10th, and of 1788. And so fast forward to April 1st. We're 5 months in. It's 1789 now, and it's been great. The crew. You got to remember, like being on these ships in the open ocean. It's really hard work. Even if it's not hard work, the weather, the conditions, the food, the water, everything is putrid and disgusting. It's a hard life. But they've been hanging out in Tahiti for the last 5 months. They've got relatively easy labor collecting breadfruit plants. They are enjoying the local sort of women and whatever's the luxuries of Tahiti. And they're faced with going back out to return to bring these breadfruit plants to the Dutch East Indies, which is where, or Dutch West Indies, where they have to Dutch East Indies, where they have to sort of like return them, and they've got to get back out into the open ocean, and they're going to go. And Bligh's all for it. He's like, he's a company man. He loves this. So they load up the boat and they go, to the great displeasure of many of the crew. And soon, like right away on board, Bligh's anger and intolerance worsens. And keeping in mind now, he was probably kind of in the same headspace, but now you're all trapped on a boat with him. You can't get away, and he's got you as captors. So Christian, he's constantly being targeted and blamed by Bligh for thefts by island inhabitants, where they stop for water, and for personally stealing coconuts from Bligh's personal supply. And Christian's pretty much just like at his wit's end. And some other crew guys learn that Christian has an intent to fashion a raft and desert the ship. And some of the other crew members sort of like realize that this about him, and they come to him and they're like, "Hey, listen, if you decide to seize the ship, like a lot of the crew are gonna back you up. Like it's gonna work out." So I think, he mulls this over a bit and kind of like decides on what he's going to do. And on April 28th, 1789, it's like, I don't know, it's like 4 a.m. or something like that. He decides to act and he moves to take the ship. He breaks into the chest storing the arms with a couple of the guys who kind of like were definitely on board with him. And they quickly capture Captain Bligh. So that same day, Bligh is set adrift on a 23-foot launch. It's like basically a boat with a sail, small boat with a sail, with 18 other men, with 5 days water and food, a compass, a quadrant, which is that. What does that do? That sort of measures the horizon to the stars, I think. So, and then a sextant, which sort of measures the distance between two far points on the horizon, and a pocket watch for keeping time. And lastly, before setting them adrift, the mutineers hand over 4 cutlasses. And several more men who want to go. So Christian he underestimated the amount of people who'd want to join him. A lot more of the crew than he expected were loyal to Bligh, although he still got the ship. So he can't fit them all in this boat. They're going to drown if he does any more.
So he doesn't force them all overboard, though.
No, he doesn't. He actually keeps a couple carpenters and forces them to stay, saying you have to because we're going to need you. And there's no more room in the boat anyway. And a lot of those who want to leave beg him to remember that they were not part of the mutiny, because they're like, tell him we didn't do this. Yeah. If you go back to England, and Christian's pretty cool about it. He's like, look, if I get captured, I promise you I'll tell them you were not part of this. But these guys have no choice. They're going. So the launch set sail at 10 a.m. with only 7 inches from the lip of the boat to the water level. Yeah, in the middle of the ocean. And Bligh raises the sail and immediately sets off for the island of Tofua, which is visible in the distance by a plume of smoke from its volcano. It's incredible, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an incredible story. The Bligh, so Bligh finds an island to land on. It's not Tofua, but it's right nearby, and he finds the natives initially friendly. But after 4 days on the island, tensions grow, and the sailors are forced to just jump in the boat, really on a moment's notice, and get off the island. But during the chaos of the departure, as they're being sort of chased down the beach by the natives, one man is killed by a stone as the locals scramble to keep the boat from launching. So rather than land elsewhere, because they've now seen this as a big risk, and risk another confrontation, and by the way, they're passing through areas during some of this journey where some islands have a reputation of even cannibalism, Bligh decides to press on to the Dutch settlement in Timor, which is 4,000 miles away. He's in a boat that's 23 feet long with now 18 total people, and he's got 7 inches of clearance. And to get there, he figures out the way to do it is to ration the food and water. So rations are implemented at 1 ounce of bread and 1/4 pint of water a day in the open ocean. So the journey, as you can imagine, is absolutely miserable. And without shelter, there's from the weather, and it's cold and it's wet, and they're hungry and it's gnawing at them. But Bligh keeps their spirits up by telling stories and getting the men singing, and just he's praying. He's just really just keeping up their spirits. This is where it comes down to the fact that he may have been a terrible, guy in a lot of ways, but
maybe he could have tried some of these tactics a little earlier. Maybe in the journey,
singing,
keeping the spirits up,
keeping spirits up. He was a little too late on the keeping the spirits up part of his personality. So They land on an island. At one other time in this journey, they landed on an island near Australia that Bligh renames Restoration Island, and they are all so hungry they find berries and oysters, and they're just stuffing their faces. And 4 days passed again on this island, and tensions are mounting again because Bligh is relentless, right? And he actually threatens to kill one of the crew. And this is all broken up by his ship's mate, and they get on the boat and sort of like get on their way again. And Bligh, who's a master navigator, he navigates because he has no charts with him. His charts were left, which he gathered for 15 years. They would make his own charts and keep them. You know. He navigates a complicated passage of shoals and small islands and reefs and sandbanks through the hardest days of the journey, like the worst of the worst, and finally sails into Kupang Harbor, I believe is in Timor, with a makeshift Union Jack flag hoisted, and all but one of his launch crew is still alive. So he's done it, 4,000 miles in a tiny craft. And although what's sort of like speaking to something you pointed out earlier, was just sort of a bit of irony, several of his men do die in the days to come, but all because of like local illnesses, and they're already weakened and etc. But he did get them there. So he immediately reports the mutiny, and then himself soon obtains passage aboard another ship for England, where news precedes him about the mutiny and his journey, and he is hailed a hero when he returns. And on November 1790, the HMS Pandora is dispatched to search for the mutineers and return them to England to face trial. So, and several of them, when they are brought back, they're hanged. Some are acquitted, but the trial illuminates Bligh's treatment of the men in his command, and the adulation that he met when he came back from England kind of fades. Like he kind of fails upwards from there. He becomes the governor of New South Wales in Australia, which might not have been such a sweet thing back then, but he does okay for the rest of his career. But he comes back a hero, and he kind of it all fades when people start to go, no, he was awful to us. There's a reason why we did this. So meanwhile, now aboard the Bounty, this is kind of where the film ends and the first book more or less ends. But a lot of fascinating stuff happens afterwards. So meanwhile, aboard the Bounty, Fletcher Christian, he is in command, and the breadfruit are thrown overboard, and they've headed back to Tahiti because they're like, this is awesome over here. But they know that the British Navy, Christian suspects that Bligh might make it,
and that the British will come looking,
and they're going to come looking for him,
and they know where to go.
They can't go right back to Tahiti, So they stop on this island called Tubuai. They try to build a little fort. It doesn't work. The locals are mad. There's a couple of huge battles, and he brings everyone together, Christian brings everyone together, and they have a meeting, and several of the mutineers request to be brought back to Tahiti, regardless of the fact the British Navy is going to go there first. The others, there are 8 in total, along with Christian, sail on after orchestrating a party. So they go to Tahiti. The local Tahitians aren't very happy with them, but they let the members the 16 guys who want to get off the boat, and then the 8 more who, like Christian included, who want to keep going, they throw a party on the boat. I think 16 or so women and 6 men join the party, and they're having a great little party. And Christian cuts the mooring and lets the boat drift off, basically kidnapping the people who were on the boat and taking them captive because what he needs, and he knows he needs women, because these guys they're going to kill each other without women. So that's what he does, right? So aboard the ship, many of the crew decide to stay disciplined. They're like, you know what, the way the Navy works because of our discipline, it's how we survive. A couple of crew guys, though, these 2 guys, they become drunken and dissolute, and they're met with really violent ends because one of them murders the other, and then the guy who murders the guy gets killed by some of the Tahitian friends of the guy he murdered. So these guys just destined to fail, you know. But back in Tahiti, the HMS Pandora has arrived and detained the mutineers. They make no distinction between those who had taken part in the mutiny and those who had been against it. All are shackled below decks, and the ship sets sail to search for the bounty. Finding nothing among the thousands of islands, the captain eventually sets sail for the Dutch East Indies, but runs aground on the Great Barrier Reef, tipping the boat over, sinking the ship. But on the way down, many of the prisoners, are unshackled and let out, but they couldn't get to all of them in time, and several just went down with the ship, just breathing the air at the top of the, as it overcame their mouths and noses, like we were talking about
right.
Before all of this. The remaining crew and prisoners are left aboard, are put aboard a launch pretty much like the one Bligh was on, and have to practically follow his journey all the way to the Dutch East Indies, just like he did from this ship that just collapsed. It's almost the same thing. So they are brought back to England, and many are hanged, although some do receive pardons for various reasons. The HMS Bounty, which is now captained by Fletcher Christian, sails west and is in search of a safe haven, and it finds Pitcairn Island, which is a small island reported in 1767, but which mischarted on the maps. So it was charted in the wrong place in the ocean. So after searching for months, he finds the island, which is about 218 miles east of its recorded position, which is great for him because the charting area provides him a safe place that is not on any other maps. It's got a rocky coast. It's hard to land. It's a great place to hide. They strip the bounty of everything of value and burn it in the bay, which is now, by the way, still exists and is known as Bounty Bay. Initially, the island is awesome. Everything is great. Everyone's happy. There's water, there's food, there's fertile land, and this is kind of where human nature takes over,
right.
Kevin.
I was just going to say, I have a feeling that this isn't how it's going to end.
I'm going to feed the pessimist in you, Kevin. Perfect. And I hate to do it. I hate to feed that monster. That monster's hungry, though.
I think you actually like it.
I might like it, but I would rather not have to feed. I'd rather pessimism
but we both know.
We know.
We know
what's going to happen here. Christian and Isabella, they have a son. They name him Thursday, October Christian. The other children are born, but gradually tensions arise because many of the Europeans, the mutineers, they begin to view the Tahitians as property.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's a very Animal Farm here.
Right.
Particularly, of course, the women. And things start to get ugly. In September 1793, tensions absolutely boil over, and 5 of the mutineers, which do include Christian, are killed by the male Tahitians in what's a planned murder plot. So back to the whole Christian thing. Yeah. I don't know that he was he's one of the targeted guys.
Yeah.
I don't know he was as good as he should have been a better.
Right.
He should have been cooler. Let's put it that way. Tensions continue. And by 1794, all the Tahitian men who came to the island are dead. They've either been killed by the widows of the men they murdered or by one another. Another mutineer commits suicide, and yet another begins to threaten more killings, but is then killed by 2 others. And calm.
So basically, once almost everybody was killed, there was peace.
Basically, all the men.
Yeah, all the men.
Yeah.
Once all the men were dead.
Yeah.
And there was just a few left, and women and children, things were okay.
Yeah. You're pretty much, it's Lord of the Flies for a little bit here, and in this case, there is something really fantastic about this because it's not a type A last demon standing gets to rule the roost kind of thing. The two men that kill the last sort of like problem person, their names are Young and Adams, last names. Young does die himself late, like from something, I forget what he dies from.
Asthma.
Yes, you're right, asthma. So, but Adams survives, and he's an all right guy. I mean, by all accounts, I don't really know. I shouldn't say that. From what I understand, he what he did was good, like overall afterwards. At least by all accounts that I've read.
I mean, there was him, 9 women.
Yeah. And a bunch of kids. And he's the only one. So what he does, it's now the year 1800, and it's just 10 years after they land on the island, and there's only one mutineer and the only man remaining. Everyone else is dead. His name's Adams, as I mentioned, and he takes on the responsibility of educating the women and children. And this is the part that I sort of say is like, great. He's not a drunkard. He's not a listless person. He decides he's going to educate everybody, which is great. In 1814, which now we're obviously jumping forward by 14 years, we're now 24 years after the search for the bounty has been abandoned. 2 British warships happen upon the island. They've basically been there isolated with no contact with the outside world for 24 years, right? These warships happen upon the island, and the natives swim out to the island, and the guys are standing on the deck, and they've seen this sort of thing before. Oh, they're going to come out in their boats and their long boats. They're going to come out. They're going to swim out to the island, and to meet them and to greet them. And the natives are these young people, and they climb on board. And the crew of these British ships are shocked that they speak perfect English. Like they walk on the board and they're like, "Hey, how are you?" It's really, I mean, it's like an alien at that.
But with a British accent.
With a British accent,
right?
Yeah. I didn't want to do the British accent right now because I don't know if I could pull it off.
Well, one of the things that, because I'm kind of looking at this too. As you're talking about it. So in 1800, there was the one mutineer.
Yeah.
There were 9 women and 19 children. So that's 29 people.
Yeah.
When the 2 ships arrived, there was a population of 46, mainly young, led by Adams. There's been a little bit of inbreeding going on.
You might have had a couple of, I don't know. What happens on Pitcairn Island stays.
Unless it was just Adams and the women only. Otherwise, it was inbreeding. Right?
Adams has definitely enjoyed, I would imagine. I mean, as when I was talking him up a little bit, I did backpedal a little bit because I don't really know. That said, I can't judge if you're the only guy on an island and you've got to if everyone's happy,
right?
Yeah. I'm that guy. No one's being taken advantage of, but I don't know that. But I'm just saying. But yeah,
but I imagine there was children from the children.
Yeah,
which is kind of like. That's where
that would be really tough. That you're getting, there's not far. You can't go far without sort of like hitting a rock of your relative.
Anyway,
so Thursday, October Christian is among the 46 islanders who were led by Adams. Adams is the leader. He's still alive, and the British Navy choose not to pursue the remaining mutineer. They leave him alone. And Adams is still, I believe to this day, celebrated as the founder of the Pitcairn community. And he did die in 1829, so he lived a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah. And he's told his story several times to over the years to people who've documented it, and this is the story. And
he is celebrated as an exemplar of Victorian morality.
Yeah. Is that a thing? Is Victorian morality a thing?
According to Wikipedia.
It might be. It might be a thing. The island, if anyone's wondering, is 18 square miles. It's volcanic rock and
not very big.
It's tropical. But today, even as of today, the population, by the way, is only 67.
So not much bigger than it was then.
Not much. And by the way, also, I guess I should say It's not far. It's where is it? It's kind of out. I don't even know. It's literally in the middle of nowhere. Like it's part of this island cluster, 4 islands called Oceania, and they are the most remote. This is one of the most remote sites of human habitation on the Earth. So really, they shouldn't be there. Basically, is what you're saying. If it wasn't for the HMS Bounty.
That's I mean, it really is a crazy story, and it's kind of like a real life Lord of the Flies.
It is, yeah.
And
but that was played off because they were kids. Kids don't know better, right? Kids can't. They're not emotionally developed enough.
This was the adults.
These idiots couldn't.
It might actually work out better in reality if it was kids.
Kevin, if you put me and you and whatever, a group of people on an island,
one of us would be dead within a week.
Yeah. I don't know how they lasted this 10 years. My God, Kevin. You'd have strangled me by now.
I'd hit you over the head with this microphone.
My goodness, yes. You'd have brought the microphone from the ship for that purpose alone. I'm going to need to hit Mark with this microphone.
I had to hit him 87 times because it's not very heavy.
Yeah, it's not very heavy. Use the base. The trick is to hold it by the microphone part and use the base.
Oh, see, smart.
Yeah, with the hinge part.
You would have won that one because you've thought of that already.
And you want to keep the hinge part moving so you get a good swing with the hinge.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you want to do. Yeah. In case it ever comes up. Could happen. You never know.
We're stranded on this desk floating in the ocean.
Yeah, because what impresses me the most about this is that they didn't kill each other right away. It took them 10 years.
It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Human beings? Really? Or they just were at each other's throats?
I don't know how they did they did it. I mean, but it's crazy that Adams managed to make it.
Yeah, and the right guy. It sounds like the right guy made it.
It
I mean, I might need some looking into to make sure,
he has 27 children.
Yeah.
From 9 wives.
Yeah. He's like the polygamist dream.
That's right.
He's a dream polygamist.
If he had been on a bigger continent,
right,
he could have had a big, he could have led a very large.
Yeah. He's like, we should have picked up some more Tahitians.
Right.
This would have been great.
Yeah.
I mean, this was cool, but 6 for 9 women, 10 years. It's a fair amount, but. You ask Adams, if we could have done it different, what would you have done?
And he does have a pretty good. Adams. That's a pretty good name for being like a Western religious leader.
Yeah. It wasn't like Clunkenfold or like one of those weird.
Right.
That reminds me. There's like this. I have this book called what's it called? Oh my goodness. I can't think of the name of it all of a sudden. I have this great book. And it is all sorts of little facts, like crazy little facts. And one of the facts is, famous people who took their mother's maiden name over their father's name.
Oh.
And I wish I could remember the exact one, but Shakespeare took his mother's maiden name. Yeah. And his father's name was something like Donkenstein or something. And you're like, thank gosh, we're not calling it like.
He was probably like,
William Donkenstein.
I think I'll go with the other one.
It was Shakespeare. Just even then, it sounded cooler.
Right.
Which at the time could have been different. Donkenstein could have been like the raddest.
Right. Maybe people were like, dude, I can't believe you chose Shakespeare over Donkenstein.
Man, Donkenstein's like
prestigious.
What is wrong with
you?
Everyone knows the Donkensteins are like, the people. That's what you want to. Everyone just envies the Donkenstein name. Right. Anyway.
Moves to the beat of a different drummer.
He did. Old Shakespeare.
That's right.
That was him. That's what everyone said about him. That's Shakespeare. That Donkenstein. Oh, this is Help Is Not on the Way with Mark Dustin.
And Kevin Ballman. We'll be back again with 2 more amazing stories.